What would you do if your own sister planned a political event at your home without even asking? What if your family handed out your house keys to strangers, then told you were overreacting? This isn't just a story about property, it's about dignity, about the quiet strength it takes to say enough, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Today we follow the journey of Lauren Hayes, a woman who built her life from the ground up only to watch her family try to claim it as their stage. But what happened when she finally took it back might surprise you. Let's begin. I was sipping coffee on my front porch in Savannah when the shock landed in my inbox. It was just another Tuesday. The wisteria was blooming along the porch rails. My dog Gus lay snoozing beside my feet, and I was sorting through emails before heading out to a client site. I opened a message from a local event planner subject line. "Thank you for hosting the Hayes Estate Political Gala Final Details." I blinked. Hayes Estate? I opened the email, half expecting it to be a mistake. But there it was, an attached PDF invitation, sleek and glossy. At the top, an evening at the historic Hayes Estate. Below it, a picture of my home. My home? The same white-columned, ivy-framed house I'd poured years of sweat and solitude into restoring. The caption read, "Hosted by Mrs. Rachel Hayes and Representative Jonathan C. Barnes Cocktails and Networking Under the Southern Sky. Rachel, my sister." I sat still, numb. I scrolled down. The RSVP form used my home address. The guest list boasted political donors, state officials, even a few names I recognized from the news. There were valet instructions, a florist listed, a catering layout, plans for my house, my space. And I had no idea any of it was happening. I reread the invite 3 times, hoping I'd misunderstood. But the more I read, the clearer it became. Rachel had planned a full-scale political fundraiser at my home, and she hadn't even told me. I called her immediately. "Lauren." "Hey," she answered, breezy as ever. "Can I call you back?" "Super slammed today." "You're hosting a political event at my house?" I said, skipping past the pleasantries. There was a pause. "Oh, you saw the invite?" I stood up, heart pounding. "Saw the invite? Rachel, you never even asked me. You didn't mention a single word." She laughed lightly. "Don't be dramatic. It's just a little reception. It's for John's campaign. And come on, it's the perfect space. Everyone loves your house." "Rachel, it's not a venue. It's my home." Another pause. "We're sisters. I figured you'd be happy to help." I stared out across the garden, the same one I'd spent 3 summers replanting after gutting the soil by hand. My voice shook. "Happy? You gave out my address. You're sending staff to set up. You didn't even have the courtesy to tell me." "Well, I was going to," she said quickly. "But there was so much going on with planning, plus Mom said it would be fine. And you're always so chill about this kind of thing." My voice dropped. "I'm not chill, Rachel. I'm blindsided." That was when she got annoyed. "Lauren, it's one evening. For our family. This is important to John's career. You don't have to make it a whole thing." I hung up. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, on that porch I built. As the world around me tilted, it wasn't just about the house. It was about what it meant, though easily I could be erased from decisions about something I'd built with my own hands. 10 minutes later, I logged onto the event website that had been linked in the email. The description read, "Join us at the stunning Hayes family estate, a cornerstone of Savannah history. Nestled in one of the city's most charming neighborhoods, this exclusive event will bring together leaders shaping Georgia's future. hors d'oeuvres provided by Maison Belle, live music, evening attire encouraged. Comments from invitees were pouring in. Can't wait to see the house. Rachel says the garden is magical. Looking forward to this. Heard the Hayes place is unforgettable. First time seeing inside a true southern landmark. So excited. I stared at the screen, heat rising in my chest. A southern landmark? This place used to have rotting floorboards and termites the size of matchsticks. When I bought it, it was a collapsed dream. Rachel hadn't even visited it in the early years. I remember calling her when I finally got the plumbing working. She said, "Cute. Just don't blow your whole life savings trying to make it Pinterest-worthy." Now, it was a campaign backdrop. Without my permission, I slammed the laptop shut. Gus looked up from his nap, sensing my energy shift. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. But one thing was suddenly, unmistakably clear. This wasn't just about politics. This was about respect, and mine had just been trampled on. I didn't always own a house with wraparound porches and painted shutters. For most of my 20s, I couldn't even afford a couch that didn't have a missing leg. When I was 25, I was living in a cramped apartment above a dry cleaner in New Orleans, working as a junior associate at a historical preservation firm. My job mostly involved documenting decaying buildings and convincing property owners that maybe, just maybe, termite-infested wood was worth saving. I was underpaid, overworked, and exhausted. But I loved it. I loved the smell of old pine and dust and history. I loved sketching facades in my notebook at lunch. I felt like I was doing something honest. I used to call my parents every Sunday to update them on projects. My dad would grunt something about being careful in that chaotic city, and my mom would switch the subject to Rachel. "Oh, your sister's planning a fundraising brunch next month. The mayor might be coming." Rachel always had something big going on. At 27, I visited Savannah for the first time on a project. I remember walking past a crumbling antebellum house tucked behind a wall of jasmine and feeling a tug I couldn't name. The shingles were peeling, the porch sagged like a tired sigh, and there were squirrels living in the attic, but I saw it not what it was, but what it could become. I cashed out my 401k, took out a loan with a terrifying interest rate, and bought it 6 months later. My parents thought I was out of my mind. "You're going to take on a restoration alone?" My dad asked. "You're not a builder. You're a decorator." "I'm an architect," I said quietly. "Rachel wouldn't throw away her future like that," my mom chimed in. "She thinks long-term." Rachel, at the time, had just married Jonathan Barnes, a rising political star in Georgia's 3rd District. She wore Vera Wang. The wedding had a string quartet and a raw oyster bar. I was seated at a back table with the florist's assistant and Jonathan's high school baseball coach. When I gave her a hand-drawn rendering of her wedding venue as a gift, she smiled and said, "That's sweet. Maybe I'll hang it in the powder room." I spent the first 2 years in my house sleeping on an air mattress in the parlor while I stripped wallpaper and treated the moldy subflooring. My only regular visitor was a stray cat I eventually adopted and named Gus. I showered at the gym. I ate cereal for dinner. I learned how to rewire light fixtures from YouTube and got calluses on every finger. The bank called twice to threaten foreclosure when I fell behind on payments. I took freelance design gigs that barely covered groceries. I skipped Rachel's baby shower because I had to choose between gas money or drywall. She never forgave me for that. I had to open gifts alone. She texted that night. Mom cried. "Thanks a lot. I spent 5 years turning the house into a sanctuary." Every tile, every board, every brass doorknob told a story not of wealth or convenience, but of stubborn love. I planted hydrangeas in the backyard because I remembered my grandmother's garden. I restored the staircase railing by hand after finding a photo of its original design from 1897. My Instagram following grew slowly, then steadily, as I posted time-lapse videos of my work. Eventually, I had enough clients to quit the firm and go solo. I hosted one open house when it was finished. Just one. Rachel showed up 45 minutes late, wearing heels that clicked too loudly on the restored oak floor. She took a short tour, sipped half a glass of wine, then whispered, "This is very personal. It doesn't really feel upscale." My mom brought a half-wilted bouquet and commented on how charming it was that I'd chosen to keep the original fireplace even though it makes the room feel so dark. My father tapped on walls and asked if I had checked for structural rot. They stayed for less than an hour. After they left, I sat on the porch and cried, not because they criticized the house, but because they didn't see me in it. All they saw was something not quite good enough. That had always been the story, hadn't it? Rachel was the polished one. The girl who made cheer captain and went to school for public relations. The one who dated the right boys, married the right man, and knew how to network in a room full of strangers. She always looked perfect. I was the one who spilled coffee, who forgot birthdays, who wore overalls and carried wood samples in her tote bag. But once we were close. When we were little, Rachel used to sneak into my room after bedtime and ask me to draw things for her. Horses, castles, dresses. She'd tell me about her plans to run a fashion empire or host a morning show. I'd listen and sketch. We'd giggle under the covers until Mom yelled for us to go to sleep. But sometime in high school, something changed. She became popular. I became invisible. She started rolling her eyes at my opinions. At family dinners, she'd tell me to loosen up or not be so intense. When I got accepted into architecture school, she told me I'd never survive the competition. "Too quiet," she said. "People like you get swallowed in that world." I guess I proved her wrong. But still, no matter how much I built, no matter how many clients I got, or how many publications featured my work, I was never enough for them. So, when I saw that event invitation, when I saw my home being labeled a family estate, used to prop up Rachel's life, her image, her ambition, it wasn't just shock, it was grief. Because deep down, I'd still hoped they would notice. That one day they'd walk into my home and say, "We're proud of you." Instead, they walked in with clipboards, caterers, and expectations. That night, I sat in my sunroom, lights off, listening to the wind rattle the magnolia leaves outside. Gus curled up beside me, and I rested my hand on his back, grounding myself in the one steady thing in my life. My phone buzzed again, a message from my mother. "Please, don't overreact. Rachel's doing something meaningful. You should be proud the family wants to use your house." I put the phone face down. Proud? They didn't ask. They didn't thank. They didn't care. And for the first time in years, I started to wonder what would it look like if I stopped asking them to. The next morning, I woke up to noise on my porch. It was subtle at first, just the faint clatter of footsteps, then a voice, then the unmistakable sound of my storm door creaking open. I pulled up the live feed from my security camera, something I'd installed 2 years ago after a string of petty thefts in the neighborhood. The screen flickered to life, and there they were, 2 women in matching black shirts with Beverly and Company events printed in white across the chest. One of them was carrying a clipboard. The other was trying keys at my front door. I froze. They weren't breaking in. They weren't panicking. They were acting like people who expected to be there. I jumped up, barely managing to throw on a sweater, and ran outside barefoot. "Excuse me," I called sharply. "Can I help you?" They both turned. One smiled politely. The other looked confused. "Hi, are you Miss Hayes?" the woman with the clipboard asked. Yes, this is my home. Oh, sorry about the surprise. We were told we'd have access to check the kitchen layout for equipment placement. We're handling catering logistics for the Hayes Estate event this weekend. I blinked. Told by who? The woman checked her clipboard. Rachel Barnes. She said you'd be expecting us. I stared at them, then at the keys. Where did you get those? From her parents, she said. They told us you'd be unavailable today, but that it was fine to proceed. They were embarrassed now, sensing the tension. I looked down at the key in the woman's hand-me-old spare key, one I'd left at my parents' house for emergencies. A wave of disbelief hit me. They had used my emergency key to let strangers into my home without telling me. You need to leave, I said, trying to keep my voice even, immediately. The caterers apologized and backed off without argument, clearly shaken, but I barely noticed them retreat. I was already walking back inside, my heart pounding, mind racing. I picked up the phone and called Rachel. She didn't answer. I texted her, "Call me now, urgent." 5 minutes later, she replied, "In a meeting, what's going on?" I didn't wait. I called my parents. My mother answered, chipper and unsuspecting. "Lauren, everything okay? Number?" "It's not." My voice cracked. "You gave my house keys to caterers?" "Oh, sweetheart, it's not a big deal." "Yes, it is a big deal. It's a violation," she sighed. "Don't be so sensitive. It's just for one afternoon." "We thought you'd want to support Rachel." "You thought I'd support her by having people enter my home without permission? By being cut out of decisions about my own property?" My father got on the line. "Look, Lauren, you're overreacting. This is good for all of us. Rachel's building something here, and it reflects well on the family." "That's not my job," I snapped. "To be your backdrop." He didn't respond to that. I heard him exhale, heavy and irritated. My mother added, "Sweetheart, you're always working alone, always so private. This is a chance to show people what you've built. You should be proud." There it was again, that word, proud. As if this whole thing was an honor I hadn't earned. I hung up. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. I stared at my phone for a long time, waiting for someone to text and say I'm sorry. No one did. That night, I got another message. This one wasn't even intended for me. A group text had been forwarded by mistake. It was between Rachel and someone named Kendra. "Rachel, venue's all set. She doesn't even use the place that much anyway." Kendra, "Wait, she agreed?" Rachel, lol. "Not exactly. She's being difficult, but I'll handle it." Rachel, "She's not exactly busy. I mean, it's Lauren." That last line hit harder than I expected. "She's not exactly busy. I mean, it's Lauren." What did that mean? That my work didn't matter because I didn't post about it on Facebook? That my life wasn't visible enough for them to acknowledge? That years of labor, sweat, renovation, and running my own small design firm didn't count because I wasn't climbing some public ladder? I felt something fracture inside me. Something that had been holding on, hoping, maybe that if I just did enough, gave enough, proved enough, they would finally see me. But they didn't. And maybe they never had. I pulled up the invitation link again. I scrolled past the sponsors and the floral designs and the RSVP button, and I stared at the headline. "Join us at the historic Hayes Estate." There was no mention of me. Just Rachel's name. Just her husband's name. Just our family home, as if I was a tenant in my own life. For days, I swung between disbelief and fury. I couldn't focus on work. My emails went unanswered. My paint samples gathered dust. I couldn't bring myself to enter the back rooms of the house, knowing they'd been described in planning documents without my consent. On Friday evening, I received a call from a woman named Beverlythe, the same event planner from the porch. Miss Hayes, she began cautiously. I wanted to confirm kitchen access and electrical capacity before we finalize the rentals. I'm assuming we're still on for Sunday's walkthrough? No, I said, slowly and clearly. We are not. The event is not happening at my home. Please inform your team and the Barnes campaign. They are no longer welcome on my property. There was a beat of silence. Then, I see. Thank you for clarifying. She was professional. She didn't push. But I could tell I wasn't the first person to pull the plug on a big plan. The difference was, this wasn't a venue. This was my home. I ended the call and sat on my porch steps, the air thick with honeysuckle and heat. The sun was setting. The house glowed behind Mite's white columns, soft in the amber light. It looked peaceful, mine. And for the first time, I realized that they didn't just want to borrow the space. They wanted to erase me from it. That wasn't something I could allow. Not this time. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me, my body still and my mind racing. There was no anger anymore, not the raw, pulsing kind from earlier in the week. That had burned off. What was left was hollow. I thought about all the times I had given my family the benefit of the doubt. When Rachel forgot my birthday 3 years in a row because she was busy with the campaign. When my mom called my business your little design thing in front of guests at Thanksgiving. When my dad asked me, point blank, if I was planning on ever getting a real job with benefits, even after I landed a 6-figure historic restoration project in Charleston. They hadn't just dismissed me, they had reduced me. Over and over again. And every time, I swallowed it. Smiled through it. Kept inviting them back. Until now. Around 3 a.m., I got out of bed and walked barefoot into the living room. The floorboards, the ones I'd refinished by hand with a rented sander and a YouTube tutorial, creaked beneath my weight. I sat on the couch, arms wrapped around my knees, and cried. Not polite, movie scene tears. I cried like I hadn't in years, messy, guttural sobs that rose from somewhere deep in my chest and didn't care who heard them. I cried for every brushed-off achievement, every swallowed comment, every time I watched Rachel glow in their approval while I shrank in the corner. I cried for the version of me that thought she could fix things by working harder, by being more agreeable, by staying small to keep the peace. And when the tears finally stopped, when my breath slowed and my throat ached from holding it all in too long, I realized something painful and necessary. They were never going to change, not unless I did. I picked up my phone and texted Elliot. You awake? I need a friend. He called within 30 seconds. Jesus. Hayes. He said, voice gravelly with sleep. It's 3 a.m. Are you okay? No, I whispered, but I'm getting there. By 8 a.m., I was sitting at his kitchen table, a mug of coffee in both hands, Gus curled at my feet. Elliot, still in sweatpants, sat across from me, watching me closely. So let me get this straight, he said. Your sister planned a political fundraiser at your house, gave your parents spare keys to caterers, and told you to suck it up because it's good for the family brand? I nodded. And your parents backed her? Without hesitation, Elliot leaned back in his chair. Lauren, that's not just inconsiderate, that's violation. You should be furious. I was, I said softly. Now I'm just numb. He frowned. You need to protect yourself. Legally, emotionally, all of it. I know. You want me to send a cease and desist? He asked. I'll draft it tonight. I don't think I need lawyers, I said. Not yet, but I need to take my house back, before they take more than just a weekend. Elliot reached across the table and squeezed my hand. So what's the plan? I need a locksmith. and time, and a place to stay. He smiled. You're staying here. That's not a question. Elliot's houseboat was moored along the Wilmington River, small, cozy, with creaky steps and a screened porch that rocked gently with the current. It smelled like cedar and old books. It was exactly what I needed. That afternoon, I called Wright & Sons Locksmiths, the best reviewed place in town. They said they could come out the next day. I also phoned my security company and scheduled a system upgrade, cameras with motion sensors, a smart lock system that recognized only registered fingerprints. As I made the calls, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't empowerment, not yet. More like survival instinct. The reflex to stand up after you've hit the floor. That evening, I walked through my home slowly, room by room. I photographed every corner, every object, every framed blueprint and antique sconce. I didn't fully trust that Rachel or someone on her behalf wouldn't still try to access the house. In the dining room, I paused. The chandelier hanging above the table brass and blown glass had taken me 4 weekends to restore. I'd found it in a salvage yard, rusted and blackened, but I'd cleaned it down to the delicate filigree. My mother once asked why I didn't just buy something new. Because this has a soul, I told her. She rolled her eyes. In the guest bedroom, I ran my fingers over the quilt folded at the foot of the bed, stitched by my grandmother, the only person who'd ever made me feel wholly seen in that family. She died before I finished the house. I like to think she would have loved it. I packed a suitcase, some design drafts, and Gus's food bowl. I took a deep breath, locked the front door behind me, and didn't look back. As I stepped onto Elliot's boat later that night, the air smelled like brine and honeysuckle. I sat on the deck, the moonlight catching the water in soft silver ripples, and felt something I hadn't in days. Stillness. The kind of stillness that comes after you finally say no. Not to be cruel. Not to start a fight, but to save what's left of yourself. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. By sunrise, I had a plan. It wasn't dramatic. There was no grand revenge fantasy, no sabotage or shouting match. That's never been my way. I just needed 3 things: privacy, security, and control. Things I should have always had but hadn't dared to enforce. Elliot brought me a cup of strong black coffee as I sat cross-legged on the houseboat's deck, laptop open, spreadsheet forming. You look like you're building a war map, he said. I am, I replied, clicking through tabs. First, logistics. I scheduled Wright & Sons to come the next afternoon. I requested a full lock replacement, front door, back door, basement, garage, everything. I also ordered a smart lock system with fingerprint access and temporary digital codes for emergency use only. Only my own print and Elliot's would be registered. Then I booked a small storage unit across town and arranged for pickup the next day. I needed to secure anything sentimental or irreplaceable: artwork, heirlooms, hard drives, business files. I'm not leaving anything I care about, I told Elliot. For them to parade past like it's part of a set. He didn't argue. Second, communication. I wasn't going to explain myself again. I'd done enough of that. I drafted a brief email to Rachel. Rachel, I am formally rescinding any implied or assumed permission to host your event at my home. Any further attempts to enter or use the property will be considered trespassing. Do not contact me about this again, Lauren. I copied both my parents. 10 minutes later, Rachel replied, Are you seriously doing this? After everything John and I have done for this family? Grow up, Lauren. I didn't respond. I archived the message, then blocked her number. My mom called within the hour. I declined it. She left a voicemail I didn't bother listening to. That afternoon, I returned home briefly to meet the locksmiths. Raphael, the lead technician, was a man in his late 50s with calm eyes and a quiet presence. I showed him around the property, explained the situation without naming names, and watched as his jaw tightened. "Family's tricky," he said, unrolling his toolkit. "But a house? That's sacred." I nodded. "That's what I've been trying to say." By sunset, every lock was replaced. The new system was online. My phone pinged with test alerts: door opened, door locked, window sensor active. The old keys were useless now. The doors belonged to me again. It felt like sealing something, not out of fear, but out of clarity, like drawing a line in concrete. The next morning, I met Natalie and Jamie, two of my closest friends, for coffee. They had already heard murmurs of the Hayes family fiasco through Savannah's reliably nosy network. "You want us to help move things?" Natalie asked. Before I could even ask. "Yes," I said. "But not just stuff. I want help reclaiming my house." They showed up that afternoon with boxes, gloves, and a cooler full of sparkling water and sandwiches. We moved fast and with purpose, packing photo albums, design portfolios, jewelry, my grandmother's silver brush set, my framed architectural license. As we wrapped a delicate ceramic lamp in newspaper, Jamie said, "You know, this is probably the first time you've ever let anyone help you." I glanced at her. "That obvious?" She smiled. "You're not just building a house anymore. You're rebuilding your space. And maybe your story, too." By dusk, everything precious was out. Gus rode with me in the passenger seat of my SUV, purring and curled into the crook of my arm as we drove to the storage unit. That night, I opened my laptop and began to write. It started as a journal entry but quickly became something more, a blog post. I hadn't written publicly in years, but the words came quickly. I titled it, "When the House You Built Becomes a Stage You Never Agreed to." I wrote about boundaries, about how sometimes family crosses them not out of hatred, but entitlement. About how women, especially quiet, capable ones, are often expected to say yes until they crack. I didn't name names, I didn't call out events, but I did say this: respect isn't earned by blood. It's earned by behavior. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is say, "Number this far, no further." I hit publish before I could second guess myself. Within an hour, the post had dozens of shares. By morning, it had hundreds. Strangers left comments. "This hit me in the chest. Thank you. Been the family doormat for 20 years. No more. You've inspired me to reclaim my own space, both literal and emotional." I wasn't alone. On Elliot's houseboat that night, watching the moon cast ribbons of light on the dark water, I felt something stirring inside me. Not quite revenge, not quite triumph, just a new steadiness. The next day, I opened my front door, stepped inside, and let the silence greet me like an old friend. The air smelled like lavender and old pine. I walked from room to room, checking each camera angle on my phone, testing the locks, adjusting settings. I was ready. Sunday would come, and they'd come tow with suits and schedules and donors in tow. But the house would be mine. Sunday arrived with the kind of weather Savannah is famous. 4 warm sun, blue skies, the faint scent of gardenias in the air. A perfect day for a garden party. Too bad there wouldn't be one. By 8 a.m., I was at Elliot's houseboat with coffee in one hand and my phone in the other. I'd already connected the new home security system to a live feed on my laptop. 4 camera angles, front porch, backyard, side gate, driveway, everything was quiet. Until 9:42 a.m., that's when the first delivery van pulled up. A catering crew in white polos unloaded aluminum trays and polished serving utensils. One of them walked to the door, clipboard in hand, and rang the bell. Nothing happened. He tried again, waited. Then made a call, pacing the porch. At 10:06 a.m., a floral delivery truck arrived. Two women stepped out with towering arrangements of hydrangeas and white roses. They stood on the sidewalk for a minute, confused, before setting the flowers down and also making calls. The camera at the front door pinged again, and then again. By 10:40 a.m., the curb in front of my house was packed with rental trucks, tables, lights, audio equipment, the works. Then came Rachel. She arrived in a white Mercedes SUV, perfectly coiffed in a pale pink wrap dress and low heels, stepping out as if she were about to film a campaign commercial. Her husband Jonathan trailed behind her, already on his phone. From the porch camera, I saw her walk briskly up to the front door and pull out a key, the old key. She tried it once. Twice. Jiggled the handle. Nothing. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then something closer to panic. She knocked hard, rang the bell, stepped back. Tried to peer through the frosted glass windows. The camera recorded every second. I watched from Elliot's living room as my phone lit up with call after call. Rachel. Mom. An unknown number. Another one, and another. I didn't answer any of them. At 11:15 a.m., the guests began to arrive. SUVs, luxury sedans, men in suits, women in pearls and summer hats, all of them stepping out to nothing. No music, no greeters, no open gates. Just a frustrated event planner pacing near the driveway, and my sister visibly unraveling on the porch. I could see Jonathan's jaw tightening. He spoke to Rachel, gesturing sharply. Then, at 11:40 a.m., a black car pulled up. Out stepped Jonathan's campaign manager, a sharp-dressed woman in sunglasses and red lipstick. She looked at the scene, at the locked house, at the chaos, and immediately pulled Rachel aside. Their conversation wasn't audible, but I didn't need sound to understand the mood. Rachel's shoulders were stiff, her mouth tight. She tried to smile, to explain. The campaign manager didn't look impressed. Around noon, some guests began leaving. Others waited awkwardly near the parked trucks, fanning themselves with programs printed for the occasion. I opened my laptop and typed a short, polite email. To whom it may concern. This property was not authorized for use as an event venue. Any claims to the contrary are false. Kindly vacate the premises. Lauren Hayes. I sent it to the event planner, CC'd Jonathan's campaign email, and the local press contact listed on the invitation. At 12:22 p.m., my mom called again. She left a voicemail. I let it roll through. Then another text appeared from Rachel. You are humiliating me. I hope you're happy. I closed my phone. By 1:15 p.m., most of the rentals were being packed up. Catering staff rolled trays back into the van. The floral arrangements sat wilting on the sidewalk. A few guests stood huddled beneath a tree, shielding their eyes, whispering. And there on the front steps of the house I built, Rachel sat with her head in her hands, mascara streaked. Her husband stood off to the side, arms crossed. I watched silently, not with glee, not with cruelty, but with clarity. For years I'd made myself smaller for the sake of keeping peace, for being the nice one, the accommodating one. But today, peace came from holding the line. That evening, as golden hour kissed the old trees outside Elliot's boat, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Rachel. It was from a woman named Linda Chen, a reporter for the Savannah Ledger. Miss Hayes. We've heard some conflicting stories about an event today at your property. Would you be open to providing your side for an article about personal boundaries and public image? I smiled. No comment for now. But it was nice to know people were starting to ask the right questions. As the sun dipped low, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat back in a creaky wooden chair, and whispered aloud for no one but myself. This far, no further. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. 3 weeks later, I moved back into my house. It felt different, not because anything had changed physically. The walls were still the same soft shade of sage I had tested 15 paint samples to find. The porch swing still creaked slightly to the left. The light still hit the sunroom just right at 3 p.m. But something in the air had shifted. It was mine now, truly mine. Not just in the legal sense, but in the emotional one, a space reclaimed. I spent the first morning walking through each room slowly, touching doorknobs, opening cabinets, running my fingers along windowsills. I was reintroducing myself. Not to the house, but to the version of me that built it. The version I had allowed to be silenced for too long. I hung a new framed print in the front hallway. It wasn't a quote or a portrait. Just one word, hand-lettered in thick black ink. Enough. Later that afternoon, as I unpacked boxes from storage, a letter slipped out from between 2 books. The envelope was cream-colored, the handwriting unmistakable. Rachel. I sat down on the floor before I even opened it. Lauren. I don't expect this letter to fix anything. But I wanted to try. What I did was wrong. I see that now. It wasn't just rude or presumptuous, it was invasive. And it hurt you. The truth? I've been jealous of you for a long time. You made a life that's real. On your terms. You didn't marry status. You didn't hide behind someone else's name. You created something beautiful out of nothing. I couldn't see it before. But after that day, after everything fell apart, I did. I'm sorry, Rachel. I read it twice. The second time, I didn't cry. I just sat quietly, letting the words settle in. It wasn't perfect. It didn't undo anything. But it was something real, something unexpected. 2 days later, my mom texted me a photo of a bouquet of sunflowers sitting in a vase. Just a reminder of your childhood room. The one with the yellow wallpaper. We miss you. When you're ready, brunch? It was the gentlest message I'd received from her in years. Not demanding, not wrapped in guilt, just a door. Left ajar. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to slam it shut. I replied, maybe next weekend. Let's keep it simple. The following Saturday, I hosted a different kind of gathering. Not a gala, not a networking event. Just an afternoon with a few friends, some neighbors, and Elliot, who brought pie and insisted on calling the event the Great Reclamation. We sat in the backyard beneath the magnolia trees, sipping lemonade and laughing about everything from botched renovations to bad dates. Gus wove between lawn chairs like a seasoned socialite. And when Natalie raised her glass and said, "To boundaries and bravery," I didn't feel awkward or defensive. I just felt home. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the Spanish moss and the last guests trickled out, I stood alone on my porch and took a deep breath. This wasn't the kind of story that ends with a perfect bow. My relationship with Rachel was still fragile. My parents still said the wrong things sometimes, and part of me still carried scars I hadn't yet named. But now, there were new things too. Clearer lines. Quieter strength. A deeper sense of self. And those new locks weren't about keeping people out. They were about reminding me who belonged in. Have you ever had to draw a line, not out of anger, but out of self-respect? Have you ever had to teach your family who you really are? If you have, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Because sometimes, the most heartwarming stories are the ones born out of the quiet act of saying no and finally meaning it. Thank you for listening. If this resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who needs to remember your space matters, your voice matters, and you, just as you are enough.